Hello everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel, and if you're watching on TikTok, welcome back. It's been a while since I posted content. I had to take some time out to reflect and refresh my ideas and interact with the world. It's very easy for one who is making content to be drawn in and forget the world around them. And that's what I felt like I was doing. I felt like I was drowning in the world of content and I needed some air, so I took time out. But now I'm ready again to share my ideas and perspective with the world. A little bit about me. I've been a teacher for some time now, and I tell you, it's my deep, undying passion, especially in these modern times. Why? Because the youth are the most important aspects of society. And if we neglect teaching the youth, then we are setting ourselves up for failure in the future. My ambition and goal with this YouTube or TikTok is to inspire the world and to show them the beauty and the power of their own mind. And today we begin with the imagination. So I'm going to quickly outline for you what we will learn today or attempt to get through. So when we speak of the imagination, we need to understand, first of all, what its role is, where it props up in our life, and what is the gravitas towards human thinking. Now, today we will talk about how the imagination is related to time and memory, especially the future. We will talk about how the imagination is a way of controlling society. I believe in the modern day, the best way to subdue, sedate, and control the minds of the people is if you can control this. We'll be discussing how cinema, films, Netflix, social media, and brain rot content is a way of putting handcuffs on your mind. As the great William Blake once said, mind manacles. So yes, control. Another thing we'll be discussing today is the imagination's relationship to words and literacy. As we know today, literacy rates are decreasing. Why? Because we're moving much towards a visually literate world, where young people are growing up now not so much reading books, but understanding the world through images. And on the surface, this may look harmless, but the most harmful things that you'll find in society are the ones that seem harmless. So we'll be discussing literacy, and my background is an English teacher. And what I've found with my students over the years is that they really struggle to understand words and how to take words and make it into an image. It's because society today have become a consumer of images as opposed to a creator of images. So we'll talk about the imagination's relationship to words. Nice. We will also be discussing Immanuel Kant. Now, Immanuel Kant, to me, is a very complicated philosopher. I've read the Critique of Pure Reason, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's not so much of an easy read. However, at the core of his ideas is the imagination. It's the animating force of the world. So we'll be discussing how he talks about perception to imagination and to concepts. We'll also be discussing how imagination is related to anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression. And I'm not a trained psychologist, however, I'm a man who believes greatly that the anxiety is just the imagination out of control, and depression is when the imagination has ceased to function. Lastly, now this is the most complicated idea, we'll be referring to Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious. But instead of calling it the collective unconscious, we will call it collective shared imagination. Collective shared imagination. If you're watching this video, and I hope you're still here, haven't bored you yet, you will be seeing some cuts in the video. That's simply for me to wipe the board or to review my notes. I would happily leave them in, but I understand the attention span of the modern day. I know even 11 seconds of me checking my notes, rubbing the board, could be enough for you to want to check Snapchat, Instagram. So my goal is to keep you here as long as I can. Now the question is, where do we begin? As you see, we have a lot to cover. When you see a tree, the tree didn't become a tree by just existing. It starts off with a seed. And this is how we'll begin the lecture. We'll just take the word imagination and I'll ask you a question. What word do you see within this word? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. And I'll say it again. What word do you see within this word? Well done. Image. Thus, if I ask you to close your eyes and I said the following: potato, apple, aeroplane, sofa, Eiffel Tower, and the image props up into your mind, well done. You're using your imagination. Now, let me take this one step further and argue that you can control your imagination. And this is the test of mastery and conquering thyself. When you read throughout philosophical history, someone like Socrates who argues, know thyself, or the ancient Chinese like Confucius would argue that the first step to becoming a man or woman is to conquer yourself, to have mastery over yourself. And people for the longest time have perceived this as your emotions, your desires, your lusts, your passions. However, I believe that the true meaning to conquering thyself or knowing thyself is having absolute control over your imagination. And this actually leads me to what anxiety and depression. And I'll be honest, in my life, I'm a human being, I've had anxiety. And I realized that the more highly imaginative you are as a person, the more anxiety you feel. And we all know that feeling of intense anxiety. It's the mind being filled with constant images. So much so that it feels like 1,000 paintings construed into one mind. And this is deeply overwhelming. And there's a beautiful saying for this, and it comes from the great Roman philosopher Seneca. Some of you will know this quote, and it says, "Man suffers more in imagination than reality." I'll say it again. Seneca said, "Man suffers more in imagination than reality." What is he arguing here? That essentially, anxiety is just a product of your imagination. And if you can get a good grip or control over your imagination, then you won't suffer so much. And I know this is easier said than done, but we can play a game right now to prove that you can control your imagination. And if you're one of my students who are watching this, you know what I'm about to do now. So I want you to take a second to close your eyes. Okay? Once your eyes have closed, I want you to imagine a red apple. Okay? And before I even go on to explain it, isn't it interesting that you didn't think of a red apple that has a bite in it, that it's moldy, discolored? You thought of a perfect red apple. And this actually gives us some inclination to what the imagination does. So when we think of idealism, ideals come in perfection. And I believe this is because the imagination only wants to project perfection at first. And this actually relates to anxiety, because we want perfection, we yearn for perfection. So our mind will give us an image of a perfect career, but it'll also give us an antithesis image of a career that is not perfect. And in this rubbing, you get, again, anxiety. So let's go back to the red apple. So you have a red apple and you're imagining it. I want you to rotate it in your mind, just like this. I want you to rotate the red apple in your mind. Now, if you're struggling to do this, it actually is a good sign that you don't have a good, strong grasp of your own imagination. Actually, your imagination is controlling you. If you're somebody who's finding this quite easy to imagine a red apple and rotate it, this is a good reflection that your imagination is strong. So well done. Now, let's take it one step further. We're going to learn a lot about how imagination and anxiety are related. Now, I want you to take this apple. While rotating it, I want you to explode it. Give you a chance. I want you to take this apple and explode it. Now, what you might find that was very easy to do. Why? Because the imagination is great at drama. The imagination is fantastic at creating dramatic scenarios. If you want proof, let's take another one. I want you to imagine a car, and I want you to explode it, crash it, blow it up. What does that show? That the imagination is naturally very good at destruction. And that is the danger of the imagination. If you don't have control over it, it will feed you destructive images because it's very easy to do so. Think about in history the most violent of criminals, the most violent of massacres. These massacres and killings begin in the imagination, and it's easy to do. It's easy to conceive. Me and you right now, if you wanted to think of a very violent torture, we can easily put one together in our mind. And it shows you the dangers of the imagination. That if you don't control it, it can give you destructive images. And this is exactly what perfectly ties into anxiety. Anxiety doesn't take genius. Anxiety doesn't discriminate. This is something that you can find with the most intelligent people and the most ignorant. And that's because we all have the imagination deeply rooted in our mind. Thus, destruction is easy. Now, I would argue, what is the opposite of destruction? And that would be construction. Now, this perfectly, in my opinion, explains why geniuses are rare. Because it takes so much greater force, control, and wielding of your imagination to imagine constructively. So when you see beautiful buildings like the Notre Dame in Paris, St. Paul's Cathedral in London, the Duomo in Florence, when you look at that and you ask yourself, how did they build this? How did they imagine to build such a beautiful building? And we very much struggle to find a relationship with that. Why? Because the imagination, a reflection on the power of your imagination is your ability to construct images in your mind. If I said to you right now, I want you to build a house from scratch, from base, and actively construct it in your mind, it takes a lot of mental power to do so. But if I ask you to do the opposite, take a house and destroy it, you can imagine doing that quite easily. Thus, destructive imagination takes no intelligence, but constructive imagination takes a great deal of intelligence. Now, how can we overcome anxiety? And that's the question. Man suffers more in imagination than reality. How can we overcome this problem? Well, first of all, you need to do a series of things. Now, what do? We have to relate back to what we said about the future. And we will speak about the past in a moment. The future can only exist within the imagination. Thus, we mentioned earlier that if you're someone who believes that anxiety is when you imagine the future in a negative way. When you are in the present moment, your mind is projecting images of the future that weigh heavily on the present moment. And there's nothing I can say to you now to do to get rid of this. You have to detox your imagination. And this ties into what we spoke about at the beginning, how the mind is controlled in the modern day. Now, we have mind. Mind. What we feed our mind will project into the future. Does that make sense? Obviously, you're not going to reply to that, are you? But does that make sense? So what we feed What we feed our mind will project into the future. Now, when you look at the state of the modern day, Netflix, cinema, Hollywood, social media, news articles, breaking news, headlines, clickbait articles, we are feeding our mind the most dangerous nutrient. And what's that? Yes, fear. Fear. And what you'll find is the most dangerous combination you can find is someone highly imaginative. They are already sensitive to images in their mind, and now you feed them fear. Because fear will enter the mind. And now what fearful things do we consume on a daily basis? We mentioned a few right now, is Hollywood. How does Hollywood influence our imagination and our ability to project the future as positive? Well, first of all, we are living in a day, in a time where a lot of films seem to be dystopian. And dystopian is imagining the future as negative. So we got Orwell, apocalyptic films, the films like The Purge, films like Hunger Games. You have to ask yourself, how are these films that are critiquing government authoritarianism allowed to be broadcast to the people? It's because it wants you to deeply fear the future. And if you can reduce optimism, hope in the imagination, in the present moment, you can control the future of the people. So my advice to you is get rid of all of this stuff. Stop watching anything that breeds fear in your mind. You have to pretend your mind is like a garden, as the great Voltaire once argued. You have to cultivate one's gardens. You have to cultivate your mind. And you have to imagine content that you draw in as they are similar to weeds in a garden. What's another thing? Now, I have sisters. One thing my mother and my sisters love to watch is serial killer shows. Serial killer shows. Why is that dangerous? Because again, it teaches you to fear. But the danger to serial killer shows is that it teaches you to fear everybody. Because anyone could be a serial killer. And what every person who watches these shows is they're watching it in the present moment. And when they're out, they imagine a situation where they're walking and a killer can come and kill them. Again, man suffers more in imagination than reality. These kind of videos, these kind of content are breeding nothing but fear and angst, anxiety towards everyone. And what is the secret control here? If you're someone who abundantly watches these shows, you fear all people. Guess what? You're now isolated. You become isolated because you trust no one. What's another form of content we can also watch that breeds fear and anxiety in our mind? Okay, cheating videos. On Instagram, you'll always find these videos of cheaters. Man got caught with his wife. Girl caught in a car with her cheating on her boyfriend. Again, this breeds fear of relationships. And how does this mentally control you? Well, again, the trick to controlling society is if you isolate individuals, if you break them away from a community or a family unit, make them demoralize and make them imagine that relationships are hopeless. Love is hopeless. And how you do that is you feed the people all this content into their mind. Thus, when they imagine the future, it's just simply a projection of everything they're being fed. And this actually takes us into music. Music. Now this wonderfully takes us into music. How does music fuel the imagination? How does music breed fear in the imagination? Again, heartbreak lyrics. The girls who listen to too much heartbreak music will end up projecting in the future what they've been fed. And I hope you're starting to get the memo here. I don't feel comfortable to keep repeating myself, but I must hammer this nail into your head. Because once this is in your mind, you will never be able to unsee it again. So again, music is a way. Gangster music. So drill music. Drill is about violence, exploitation, destruction of communities through drugs, alcohol, and sex. And if you're someone who's taking this in, you'll project this in your imagination of the future, where you could be walking down the road and you think you might find an op, or it can breed your imagination to be violent. It can breed violence in your imagination. This is why it's integral, absolutely integral, to control what your mind is consuming. Because again, where are human beings going? We are only going towards the future. And especially in the modern day today, where people more than ever are hopeless and nihilistic. Nihilistic just means they find no more meaning in the world. And they only find no meaning in the world is because their mind is taking in all this fear, and again, I'll say it again, is projecting it into the future. Now, lastly, I think the most devastating way to control the minds of the people is through news headlines. So you see some people on social media like Dylan Page, the Daily Mail, breaking news, I can't believe this just happened, the world is going to rubbish, the world is coming this, who knows what the future holds. You as the ignorant onlooker are taking in, consuming this fear. And when you think about an optimistic, bright future for yourself, you no longer can, because you've lost the ability to. Because these breaking news headlines remind you that you are nothing in this world. You're nobody. There's many external events outside of yourself that you have no control of. This is a way to demoralize and again isolate you as an individual, to make you feel like it's me versus the world. That's how you destroy the optimism in a human being. Again, this all stems from the imagination. I'm going to rub something off quickly. So far we've spoken about how anxiety is a product of the imagination and how everything in your imagination is fueled by the content you consume, and especially if it's fearful content, your mind will project it, leaving little room for optimism. Now, we'll talk about how the imagination and the future could be weaponized against you through false optimism. Now, how do you get someone to buy your product? There's a famous quote by Ben Franklin, and it goes like this. We'll get to depression in a moment. Ben Franklin said, many men believe they are buying a pleasure when in reality they sell themselves to it. What does that mean? Many men believe they are buying a pleasure when in reality they are selling themselves to it. When you buy a product that you believe will make you happy, you're not buying the product for its physical value. You're buying the product. Before you buy the product, you're buying it because it stimulates your imagination. Stimulates your imagination. Now, if you look on the internet, you see many people selling courses, get quick rich scheme. If you want to be a millionaire, join my team. You can make £10,000 a month. Look at my yacht. Look at the sea view I have. Look at this girl I'm with. Look at this Lamborghini I have. How do they make you sign up? It's because they feed your mind with images of pleasure. These images of pleasure enter your mind and they ask you, you can have this, but when can you have it? You can't have it now. When can you have it? You can only have it in the future. So again, your mind takes in these images of pleasure, mind, and it projects out into the future of you with these pleasures. And again, I'm telling you, the people who fall for these scams, fall for this marketing, are people who are weak in the mind. When I say weak, I don't mean inferior. Be careful. I mean one who are easily led astray, meaning they allow other people to control their imagination. They have no real grasp of it. Because someone who is reflective and has a good grasp of their imagination will be able to quickly work out that this is unrealistic. I'm being sold a dream. And again, what does that mean? To sell someone a dream is to sell them a future that stimulates their imagination again. I'm telling you people, the imagination is the root of everything. If we can argue that the anxiety is when images are out of our control, we are projecting images that are not ours but something simply we've digested, what can then we argue depression is? Depression is when we have given up on our imagination. The imagination has ceased to function. When someone looks into the future and they can no longer see it, that is when depression happens. So what you find with weed smokers, drug addicts, is that the only future they can conceive is, again, just consuming stimulation. And what these drugs do to you is that they close your imagination quietly. And they remove you from your own imagination. They remove you from your own future. Hence, depression is the imagination ceasing to function. And if you want to take it one step further, when people unalive themselves, we can argue that is them imagining a future of the world where they are not needed, or imagining a future where they don't even belong in it anymore. I hope we're starting to see how, again, the imagination is the mother box of all thinking. Yet, let's now see what the opposite to this is. Let's see someone with a good imagination. Okay, so we've got mind. We've got future. We've got projection. Okay. What can we feed our mind that will create a different future? Now, this will explain how various individuals throughout history, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Nikola Tesla, Plato, Kant, Descartes, Napoleon, Lenin, Stalin, all these individual great men are able to change the world. And it's not so much so that they have great characters. They are born divine. They are chosen by God. It's simply what they feed their mind, what they're able to project into the future is something completely brand new and fresh to society. So the way you can reconnect with your imagination, detox and clean it, is this way. If you're someone who digests content that is positive, you're someone who digests content of inspiration, if you're someone who takes in wisdom, if you're someone who studies great people in history, you'll take in optimism, because great men or women in history are always the greatest proof that you, my friend, can change the world. And if you are watching, never doubt your ability to change the world. Optimism. Say you're someone who reads. you read. Say you're someone who avoids all fear and you only take in love and hope. Someone who takes this in, their mind will feed on it, and they'll be able to project into the future a world of goodness, change. And that is the trick to genius. See what the world is in the future. Whatever the people are imagining, if the collective of people are imagining a certain image of a bad, destructive future, your job is to imagine a future of one of greatness, one of hope and optimism. And your goal is to convince other people that the imagination you have is the correct one. Is correct. And that's all leaders do. And that's what separates a good leader and an amazing leader. Amazing leaders are able to control the imagination of the people that follow them. And they believe in what they're saying about the future. Bad leaders are the ones who imagine a future, control the imagination of the people. No, who cannot control the imagination of the people. Or when they do control the imagination of the people, they become tyrants. That no, you can't imagine that. You can imagine what I can. A great leader is able to take in the imagination of the people and correct it or fix it or cleanse it for them. So my message to you is, if you want to be able to change the world, inspire, create a future that is beautiful for your children and for yourself, you must control your mind feeds. Because again, what do we say? The future is nothing but imagination. So he who controls his imagination controls the future. So I'll write that here. Control the imagination. Then you can control the future. This takes me quite nicely to collective, shared imagination. There's nothing more dangerous than someone who has control of their own imagination. What do we call those people who can control their own imagination? We call them this nice little saying, they think for themselves. We should change the word think for themselves to imagine for themselves. If you look at the majority of society, we are all drawing from the same content. So imagine we have Netflix, cinema, headlines, shows, the news, serial killers, music. Imagine this as a buffet, okay? Imagine this as a buffet. Most of the people in society are drawing from this. Millions of people watch Netflix. Millions of people watch serial killer shows. Multi-millions watch cinema. The same shows, the same headlines. And the reason why we prefer to watch things that we are all watching is because we get to gossip. But that's the trick. We don't want to be left out. Now imagine if majority of the population is drawing from the same pool of images, then then society will have a collective shared imagination. That means if you used to ask the average person on the street and ask them, do you imagine the future is bad or good? Do you think the world is going getting worse or better? 99% of people would say is getting worse. Why is that? Why is it majority of people will agree that the world is getting worse? It's because we are all drawing from the same pool of fear. So the way you control people's minds is this. You connect their mind to a Wi-Fi box of fear. And the only way you can control a person is if they have fear in their mind. Because if someone's fearful, you can offer a remedy. Oh, you're scared. You think the future's going bad. Well, if you want it to be good, listen to me. If the majority of the people believe the world is going to a correct place, humanity is on the right path, you can't control the mind this way. Because they believe, whoa, don't fix what's not broken. We're going in the right place. What can you offer to this world? Think about the greatest manipulations of history. Nazi Germany, Soviet Union Russia, the Star of David country in the Middle East. They all use fear. The people, we are going towards a negative future. If you don't listen to me, we'll help this. And the only way you can get that message across, or the only way you can manipulate, is if you connect all the people to a mother box of fear. Now, what would you argue the most dangerous type of individual is? Is the one that has unplugged from this. And they choose to draw in from themselves. Why is this individual dangerous? Because then they have their own way of imagining. And what can this person do? If they are good enough at speaking, they are passionate enough, and they have an image that people can believe in, a future where people can invest in, what will happen? People will start leaving this cesspit of rubbish and start connecting to this individual. And this will explain prophets. This will explain leaders. This will explain geniuses through history. They're able, as I said earlier, to create their own image, and people disconnect from mass media, and people connect to this one person. After everything I've said, I know I've repeated myself a lot on a lot of things, but again, it's to really hammer home the point, because this is a new perspective for some of you, and I know some of you have never really taken the time out to consider how valuable the imagination is. Now we're going to see how the imagination animates everything in our world today. And first of all, we need to speak about the imagination's relationship to words itself, and how we've lost the creative ability and we've become consumers of images and no longer creators of images. Now, the best way to explain it is this. So when we have a word, the only function, people believe the function of words is to communicate. And yes, that's one aspect of words, I agree. However, the only way you can communicate through words is if you put an image into someone's mind. The reason why we say that person hasn't listened is because the image we're trying to convey from our mind to theirs hasn't been able to transfer completely, because they haven't taken all the words in, to be able to create the image we want them to imagine. Furthermore, when someone has misunderstood what we've said, is because the image we have in our mind isn't the one that they have. Thus, we have to recalibrate our words very finely so they're able to best imagine what we imagine. Thus, communication is the ability to be able to transfer image to another mind. I guess text an image or send an image to someone else's mind. This is the function of communication. But why has communication declined over time, especially in the modern day amongst the young? Is because the young no longer read, and they've lost that creative ability to turn word into image. The only way you can turn word into image is through creation. And a sign of a young person and all the students I've ever met, the ones that tend to be highly intelligent are not because they can understand things very quickly. It's because they're able to imagine very well. And that's why young minds are so beautiful, because their ability to imagine things is unbelievable. If you have a young sister, a young brother, nephew, cousin, never, ever jump on their imagination and shut it down. Let that imagination freely express itself. Why? Because the world depends on it, on the reasons I said earlier. Now, what we have today is no longer the ability to create an image in our mind, from words to image. We have become simply, bloody hell, where's my pen? We have simply become consumers of images. What does that mean? If I order fast food for you every single day, will you be able to be a good cook? No, because you've become a consumer of food and no longer a creator of food. And the same premise lies for the imagination. People now watch social media. So you know what that means, reels. We also have, as we said earlier, Netflix, shows. And this also means people love to learn on YouTube now through videos. We have become a visually literate society, meaning that we can only learn things now through watching an image as opposed to reading and creating the image. Why is this dangerous? Because if we lose this ability, that is the death of art. Death of art. The death of expression. Because if you look at it in the modern day, a lot of people, how they express their emotions now is that they'll put an image on their Instagram story. They put an image on their TikTok that explains the emotions they're feeling, as opposed to trying to use words to capture the image in their mind. And why is this dangerous for the world? Because if young people grow up as consumers of images and no longer creators of images, the future, again, is dead. The future will die. And it is dying, unfortunately. Telling you, as someone who has been a great consumer of images, as someone who reads a lot, I find myself sometimes struggling to understand what I'm reading because I've just put 2 hours of scrolling, doom scrolling. Because I've been so used to consuming images, I'm struggling now to create the images when I'm reading words. And if I'm finding that in myself, imagine the young people who are 11, 10, 9, 12 years old today, growing up in this generation where they won't even give books a chance, words a chance to be able to create images. And again, this relates to what I said earlier about the future. If young people have lost the ability to create images in their mind and can only consume, they will only project what they are consuming. That is why the great individual, the great genius, the person who will change the world is one who creates images for themselves, and they are not consumers. So my advice to you is stop consuming images. Stay away from it and relearn the ability to create images again. Because we're all human, because we all have an imagination, it doesn't mean we always get to keep our imagination. Our imagination is something you must cultivate, something you must protect. And the only way you can protect your imagination is if you keep it alive, if you keep feeding it words and language. Because I'm not sure if I said this earlier, and it's been a long video, so this is my first one, so give me a chance. The imagination can only work if there's a lack. When I say lack, I mean when there's something not there, the imagination is most potent. So for example, when you're a child in your room and it's a dark room, the chair becomes a demon. The clothing over the cupboard door becomes a spirit. The table in the nighttime becomes a spaceship. The imagination is most powerful when there's a lack. But in the modern day, when the images are shoved in your face, you haven't got a lack. You have an abundance, and imagination doesn't work then. Again, if we lose that creative ability, we've lost our ability to imagine the future as well. And we'll lose our ability to think for ourselves, especially amongst the young. So my advice is, if you have young siblings, young nephews, etc., take them away from the screens. Try as best as you can not to allow them to see images. And you'll see that creative ability flourish out of nowhere. So in my time of teaching, comprehension skills are poor. Because when kids read words and languages, they struggle to create images in their mind because they're so used to consuming and they've lost that ability to create. And that is a tragedy, a genuine tragedy. Now, the last thing, I know I'm going at a fast pace because there's a lot to talk about. Another thing we haven't discussed is the past, memories. Do I even need to explain how the imagination works in memories? I'll leave that to you as homework. Please, if there's anything I've missed, anything that you believe that works well with what I've said today, please leave it in the comment section. I know this has been a lot today. It's a lot. It's my first time giving a lecture on YouTube, so my pacing might be a bit off, but it's going to be many videos, many lectures to come. The next lecture will be on Aristotle's The Good is That Which All Things Aim. I hope you've taken something today. And more than importantly, I hope you can now recognize why the imagination is so important. How if one can control their imagination, you can control the future. And don't allow the powers that be to have a monopoly on your imagination. And if I had to sum up the modern day in a sentence, is the imagination has been colonized, unfortunately. But please, leave me feedback, like, subscribe and comment. I've really enjoyed doing this. It's difficult, but a 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. So thank you. Please enjoy.